Hail Christ, hail victory. Um, you know, we're at a very crucial point in history. And you always see these memes, which way Western man, right? And it's like this fork in the road, and the Western man has to choose which path he's going to take. One leads to further degeneracy, further third world conditions, anti-West, anti-Christian culture. And the other path leads to a revitalization of the West or a restoration of the West, something even better. And really, kind of what I believe is the path for the Western man right now stands at two paths because, it's really more than two, but I'm going to pick two paths that the conservative / right-wing Western man has before him, that what path he take will determine the future of the West. Jordan Peterson, this dime store philosopher that's really popular in social media, recently went on Joe Rogan's show basically to gaslight the right wing or anybody on the right that criticizes Israel and, the so-called chosen people, right? Basically saying they're narcissistic, Machiavellian, sociopaths, psychopaths. And he's recently been part of this campaign to demonize the phrase Christ is King, right? He's been on this kind of rampant antichrist train that a lot of the conservatives or neocons and it's just a shame because this is the wolf in sheep's clothing effect. When he came out a few years ago to the forefront of like the social media world, a lot of young men were encouraged by his talks, right? And right now, the young Western man is at a crossroads, just like really all the West, whether you're my age, Gen X, or Gen Z, Boomer. We still got especially Gen X, we still got a little life left in us, right? Boomers are pretty much got one foot out the door. But if you're a boomer and you're kind of, if you're based and you know what's going on, you know the times that we're living in, you know what this world is trying to do to the Western man and woman and to their culture and to their faith, which is Christianity, right? Then you still have an obligation to not live out the rest of your life just waiting for the grave, but you have an obligation to help steer the ship of the West into the direction that I propose that is the only solution for the West, and that's Christ as King. And as me, a Gen X, I have a little more life than the boomer. Well, if things go to their natural course and things don't happen that just are untimely, but I have the responsibility also of trying to steer the ship of the West to Christ as King. Now, Jordan Peterson is being used, obviously, as a lackey of Christianity's most consistent enemy, I should say, the synagogue of Satan. We'll leave it at that. He's being used to steer the right in the direction of the Judeo worldview, the Zionist worldview. Because that's really what Jordan Peterson represents in this little thing. And so what people that criticize modern day Israel, namely because of the war in Gaza or the genocide going on in Gaza, are now being gaslit and demonized by the neoconservative right, the moderate right, I wouldn't even say mega right, just say conservatives, neoconservatives. They're being gaslit because they're actually showing some care. One second. So again, right-wing people like myself who show some kind of care or displeasure at what Israel is doing in Gaza, because we're seeing the images, right? We're seeing the images of destruction, children, women, even men. Doesn't matter. They're all, people made in the image of God, and these images should be sensitive to us. And listen, one of the things that I will say is I don't want to see that to nobody's people. I don't care who it is, of women, children, and even innocent men. The destruction that we see in Gaza. Now, listen, I'm not anti-war, and I understand things happen in war, and innocent people get killed. That's just the way war is. But we're seeing in Gaza something different. We're seeing a genocide. We're seeing a lack of empathy from the people doing it. And if you express empathy for these women and children in Palestine, or men, anybody, you're being gaslit and demonized as quote unquote woke right. And you're being now by a Jordan Peterson labeled as Machiavellian, psychopathic, narcissistic, and it's all being used as a weapon to further browbeat Western man into submission. It's being used to further browbeat Western man into submission. He's apparently, I was listening to Nick Fuentes, and Nick Fuentes apparently was an object of Peterson's diatribe or the Groypers or whatever. The fact is, there is a growing number of right-wingers who do not want America to be a policeman for Israel, who do not want America supporting Israel's wars against their enemies. Why? Because the founding of our country wasn't for Jews, meaning it wasn't to be a future policeman for whenever they got a state. The founding of our country, and in my research, and it can be easily proven, was as a Christian nation with the statement by George Washington of no foreign entanglements. And here we are, what is it, 250 years later, so-called patriots are now identified by by how much they're pro-Israel, right? By how much they're pro-Israel. That's the modern day patriot. By how much you're pro-Israel is how you're defined as a patriot. If you're anti-Israel, or you just think we shouldn't even be helping them, you don't not anti-Israel, but you just don't want to fund them, then your label is woke right. And then Jordan Peterson, from his mouth, psychopathic, Machiavellian, narcissistic. Why? Because he's being sent out as a hammer to propagandize people, that these people, mostly Christian, mostly Western men and women that are criticizing Israel, that they're narcissistic, Machiavellian, psychopathic, because they dare show empathy and they dare show sympathy for the people in Palestine that are getting obliterated. And that's what Christians are supposed to do. What world did I wake up in? If I was growing up, I grew up in the 80s, and if I somehow was in a long coma and woke up in 2025, I never would have thought Christians would have been cheerleading genocide, and now even increasing the number of Catholics. And Jordan Peterson's one of these social media influencers that is now waging war against the phrase Christ is King, of which the West was built on, of which Christianity stands or falls on. So again, we stand right at that fork in the road. Which way, Western man? Jordan Peterson, the Zionist worldview, Tikkun Olam, America subservient to Israel, America supporting Israel's every move. More and more money is being funded for Israel, which means less and less rebuilding of our cities and infrastructure in America, less and less addressing the homeless problem, the drug epidemic. And less restoring some semblance of morality in America, and more wars in the Middle East, less and less strong Christian professions of faith, like Christ is King, the Catholic Church is the true Israel. There is no dual covenant, there is no old covenant. The Jews, like everybody else, have to repent of their sins and submit themselves to Christ and his one true holy church that he established 2,000 years ago. And again, you have a choice. Because, see, the Donald Trump conservative worldview, and you somewhat include MAGA in this, although that's a whole different thing. But Donald Trump is about as conservative as Bill Clinton was in the 90s, even less conservative because in the 90s you didn't have sodomite pseudo-marriage. The transgender thing wasn't really a big thing back then. The Democrats in the 90s didn't support sodomite pseudo-marriage. Well, largely, I should say. But he's been used as a Trojan horse to bring the right, to shift the right more left. Where if you look at the talking points of the modern conservative movement, they're very liberal. They admit this, that conservatism is liberalism. Conservatism is a product of liberalism. All this left-right dynamic of conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican comes from the French Revolution. And that was an anti-Christian revolution. More and more Christians are abstaining from saying Christ is King. More and more Christians are saying Jews are saved by their own covenant. More and more Christians are saying, well, we're not the church is not Israel. Christ is not king on the throne of David in heaven. But there's a strong growing wave of young folk that are not buying into Judeo-Christianity. They're not buying into the Zionist worldview. They're not buying into the conservative worldview that does nothing but give up ground and only conserves what's left of conservatism, which at this point is very little. Because now conservatism, they're pro-abortion, just limited. They're pro-transgender, pro-sodomite pseudo-marriage. They just don't want, you know, what is that, Drake Time Story Hour or whatever. If you have a choice, what is it going to be? Are we going to march to the beat of Christ is King? Or are you going to allow yourself to be propagandized by these neoconservatives to submit to a Judeo worldview and deny and forfeit your Western Christian heritage? Hail Christ, hail victory.